In the quiet corridors of a London clinic, two of Britain's most prominent royal figures found themselves sharing something no amount of privilege could shield them from: vulnerability. When King Charles III and Princess Catherine both faced serious health challenges within weeks of each other in early 2024, the world watched as the modern monarchy confronted its most human moments. What emerged from their parallel journeys of healing wasn't just physical recovery, but a profound deepening of family bonds that would forever change the relationship between a father-in-law and daughter-in-law who had always maintained formal respect, but now discovered genuine affection. This is the true story of how illness became an unexpected bridge, connecting two hearts through shared courage, mutual support, and the kind of authentic care that transcends royal protocol. It's a tale that reminds us that beneath crowns and titles, even royals are simply human beings navigating life's greatest challenges with grace, dignity, and love. The morning of January 17th, 2024, began like any other at Kensington Palace. Princess Catherine, known to the world as Kate, was reviewing her schedule with her private secretary when the call came. The voice on the other end belonged to her consultant, and the words that followed would change everything. The routine abdominal surgery she had undergone weeks earlier had revealed something unexpected, something that required immediate attention and a treatment plan that would keep her away from public duties for months. Kate felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders, but this time it felt different, heavier. As the Princess of Wales, she had always been the picture of health and vitality, the mother who chased her children through palace gardens, the royal who could keep up with any engagement thrown her way. Now, she faced the reality that her body needed time, care, and healing that couldn't be rushed by royal schedules or public expectations. The same week, just across London, King Charles was receiving his own life-changing news. What had begun as a routine procedure for an enlarged prostate had uncovered something more serious. The doctors spoke in measured tones about treatment options, recovery timelines, and the importance of rest. For a man who had waited 73 years to become king, who had thrown himself into his duties with the enthusiasm of someone making up for lost time, the forced pause felt almost impossible to accept. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Here were two people at the heart of one of the world's oldest institutions, both facing the most democratic of human experiences. Illness doesn't care about titles, wealth, or royal blood. It affects everyone equally, demanding the same things from a king as it does from any ordinary person: patience, courage, and the willingness to accept help. Catherine's first instinct was to protect her children. George, Charlotte, and Louis had grown up understanding their mother's public role, but this was different. How do you explain to a 10-year-old that Mummy needs special medicine that might make her tired? How do you maintain normalcy when photographers lurk outside hospital entrances? William, ever protective of his family's privacy, immediately went into what palace staff privately called fortress mode, creating barriers between his wife's treatment and the inevitable media speculation. The princess found herself thinking about her own mother, Carol Middleton, who had always been her anchor during difficult times. The woman who had built a party supply business from her kitchen table now became the steady presence helping to maintain routine for three young royals while their mother focused on getting well. Carol's practical approach to crisis management, take it one day at a time, love, became Catherine's daily mantra. King Charles, meanwhile, was grappling with the weight of newly acquired responsibilities that now felt impossible to fulfill. The red boxes of government papers still arrived daily, but reading through briefings felt surreal when balanced against medical appointments and treatment schedules. His private secretary suggested postponing several upcoming state visits, but Charles initially resisted. "The monarchy doesn't stop because the monarch is unwell," he said, though his voice lacked its usual conviction. It was Camilla who gently reminded him of something he had often told others. "You can't pour from an empty cup, darling." The queen consort, who had watched her husband throw himself into royal duties with relentless energy since his accession, now became his strongest advocate for rest. She cleared her own schedule to accompany him to appointments, creating what she called their normal days: quiet mornings with tea and newspapers, afternoon walks in the garden when he felt strong enough, and evenings watching old films together. The palace staff, those dedicated individuals who keep the monarchy running behind the scenes, face their own challenges. How do you maintain the dignity of the crown while two of its most prominent members are facing health battles? The answer came from an unexpected source: honesty. Rather than the traditional royal approach of saying nothing until forced to make a statement, both Charles and Catherine chose transparency appropriate to their situations. Catherine's team released a statement that was notably personal in tone, acknowledging that she needed time to recover and asking for privacy for her family. It was a departure from the usual formal palace language, and the public response was overwhelmingly supportive. Messages poured in from around the world, not to Her Royal Highness, but to Kate the mother and Catherine the woman. The distinction mattered more than anyone expected. Charles's approach was similarly refreshing. His statement about his cancer diagnosis was direct and hopeful, thanking the medical team and expressing gratitude for the early detection. More importantly, it included his hope that his openness might encourage others facing similar challenges. For a man who had spent decades being carefully guarded about personal matters, this level of vulnerability was revolutionary. The first few weeks were the hardest. Catherine found herself sleeping more than she ever had in her adult life, her body demanding rest in a way that felt foreign to someone accustomed to packed schedules. The palace gardens at Adelaide Cottage became her sanctuary, where she could walk slowly among the flowers without the pressure of being on for anyone. Sometimes William would find her there in the early morning, simply sitting and watching the sunrise through the trees. Charles experienced his own version of forced slowness. The man who had revolutionized royal engagement by cramming multiple events in a single days now found himself grateful for empty calendars. He began noticing things he had missed in decades of rushing. The way light fell across the paintings in his study, the sound of birds outside his window, the particular shade of blue in Camilla's eyes when she looked at him with concern. During this time, something unexpected began to happen. The formal relationship that had existed between Charles and Catherine, built on mutual respect but maintained through proper channels and protocol, started to shift. It began with a simple phone call. Charles, feeling stronger after a good day, called to check on his daughter-in-law's progress. What was intended as a brief, polite inquiry turned into a 40-minute conversation about everything from treatment side effects to the challenge of explaining illness to children. Catherine found herself speaking to her father-in-law with an honesty she had never felt comfortable expressing before. She talked about her fears, her frustration with being unable to fulfill her duties, her guilt about the impact on her children. Charles listened with the patience of someone who truly understood, offering not platitudes but genuine empathy born of shared experience. For Charles, the conversation was equally revealing. He had always admired Catherine's dedication to her role, her natural warmth with people, her obvious devotion to William and the children. But this was the first time he had glimpsed the woman behind the royal facade, intelligent, thoughtful, and dealing with challenges remarkably similar to his own. The palace doctors, coordinating between both patients, noted something interesting in their medical reports. Both Charles and Catherine were responding well to treatment, but more than that, both seemed to have found a kind of peace with their situations that was helping their healing. The stress levels that had initially accompanied their diagnoses had settled into something more manageable, replaced by acceptance and focus on recovery. As January turned to February, a routine was established that would define the coming months. Charles would call Catherine every few days, timing his calls for when she was most likely to be resting comfortably. Catherine began looking forward to these conversations, finding in her father-in-law not just family support, but genuine friendship. They talked about books they were reading during recovery time, shared observations about the changing seasons outside their respective windows, and gradually began discussing deeper topics about duty, family, and the unique pressures of royal life. William watched this developing relationship with something approaching amazement. His wife and father had always been cordial, respectful, even warm in public settings. But this was different. This was real connection, the kind built through shared vulnerability rather than shared obligations. When Catherine smiled after hanging up from one of Charles's calls, it was the first time William had seen her look genuinely happy since her diagnosis. The media, initially respectful of both patients' privacy, began to speculate about the impact of these simultaneous health challenges on the monarchy itself. Constitutional experts were consulted, succession plans were quietly reviewed, and Republican voices wondered aloud about the stability of an institution when its key figures were facing serious illness. But those closest to the situation saw something different. A royal family that was becoming more human, more relatable, and paradoxically stronger through its willingness to show vulnerability. By the end of February, both Charles and Catherine had settled into their respective recovery routines with something approaching contentment. The initial fear and uncertainty had been replaced by quiet determination and mutual support. Neither yet knew that their individual journeys of healing were about to become something much more significant, a shared experience that would deepen not just their personal relationship, but their understanding of what it truly means to serve while remaining authentically human. The turning point came on a gray Tuesday morning in early March. Catherine had been having what she privately called a difficult day, one where the treatment made her feel more exhausted than usual, where even simple activities felt overwhelming. She was sitting in the conservatory at Adelaide Cottage, wrapped in a cashmere throw, watching the rain streak down the windows, when her phone rang. "Catherine, my dear," came Charles's familiar voice. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." There was something different in his tone, a gentleness that went beyond mere politeness. "I was having a rather challenging morning myself, and found myself thinking of you." For the first time since her treatment began, Catherine felt tears well up, not from sadness, but from the profound relief of being understood by someone who truly knew what she was experiencing. "Actually," she said, her voice slightly unsteady, "I was just sitting here feeling sorry for myself, and wondering if that makes me terribly weak." Charles was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his words carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. "My darling girl, I spent the first month of this journey telling myself that kings don't have the luxury of feeling unwell. I've learned that pretending to be stronger than we are doesn't make us brave. It just makes us lonely." That conversation lasted nearly 2 hours. They talked about the strange guilt that comes with being unable to fulfill expectations, the way illness strips away pretense, and forces you to confront who you really are beneath all the roles you play. Charles shared something he had never told anyone, how he sometimes lay awake at night worrying that his illness would disappoint people who had waited so long for his reign. Catherine admitted that she felt like she was failing everyone who had believed in her ability to modernize the monarchy. "Do you know what I've realized?" Charles said toward the end of their call. "We've spent so much time being what others need us to be that we've forgotten we're allowed to simply be human beings who sometimes need care and kindness." From that day forward, their relationship fundamentally changed. The formal boundaries that had existed between them, the careful "Your Majesty" and "Your Royal Highness," the structured conversations that never strayed far from safe topics, began to dissolve. In their place grew something more precious, genuine affection built on mutual respect and shared understanding. Catherine began calling Charles Papa during their phone conversations, something she had never felt comfortable doing before despite his gentle encouragements over the years. For Charles, hearing that word in Catherine's voice touched something deep in his heart. He had always wanted to be a true father figure to William's wife, but protocol and their natural reserve had kept them at arm's length. Now, illness had given them permission to love each other without formality. William noticed the change immediately. His wife, who had always spoken respectfully about his father, now talked about Papa Charles with genuine warmth. She would smile when sharing something funny he had said during their daily calls, or look thoughtful when repeating a piece of advice he had offered about managing public expectations while focusing on private healing. "He's not at all what I expected when we have these long conversations," Catherine confided to William one evening. They were in their bedroom at Adelaide Cottage, Catherine propped up against pillows as she did her gentle evening stretches recommended by her physiotherapist. "I mean, I've always known he was thoughtful and kind, but there's this wonderful sense of humor that comes out when he's not being formal. And the way he talks about you and Harry when you were children, William, he remembers everything. Every milestone, every funny thing you said, every time you were hurt or scared." This revelation moved William more than he expected. His relationship with his father had been complicated over the years, marked by love but also by misunderstandings and the pressure of their unique circumstances. Hearing that Charles spoke of him with such tenderness when talking privately with Catherine helped heal old wounds William hadn't even realized he was still carrying. Meanwhile, Charles was discovering layers to Catherine's personality that had remained hidden behind her public composure. During one particularly long conversation, she revealed her ongoing struggle with imposter syndrome, the persistent feeling that she wasn't qualified for her royal role despite years of successful public service. "There are still days," she admitted, "when I look at photos of all the amazing royal women who came before me, your mother, the Queen Mother, even Diana in her own way, and I wonder what I'm possibly thinking trying to follow in those footsteps." Charles's response was immediate and fierce in its certainty. Catherine, listen to me carefully. I have watched you for over a decade now, and what I see is a woman who brings genuine warmth to every person she meets. You have transformed what it means to be royal in the 21st century, not by trying to be like anyone who came before, but by being authentically yourself. That is your gift, not just to the monarchy, but to everyone whose life you touch. These conversations were helping both of them process not just their current challenges, but decades of accumulated pressure and expectation. Charles spoke about the loneliness of his early years as heir, the constant scrutiny, the way every personal relationship was analyzed for its implications on the monarchy. Catherine shared her experience of having her every outfit choice, facial expression, and public appearance dissected by media and public alike. Sometimes I dream about being able to go to the grocery store. Catherine laughed during one call. Not for any particular reason, just to remember what it feels like to be anonymous for 10 minutes. I dream about gardening, Charles replied. Really gardening, getting my hands properly dirty, spending an entire afternoon with roses without anyone needing to know my whereabouts or approve my schedule. These shared fantasies of ordinary life created another bond between them. They began planning what Charles dubbed their normal person day, a theoretical perfect day where they could do whatever they wanted without security protocols, media attention, or royal obligations. Catherine's ideal day involved breakfast in a regular cafe, a walk through Hyde Park without being recognized, and an evening watching films with her children without any thought to the next day's schedule. Charles's perfect ordinary day was surprisingly simple. Morning tea in the garden, reading newspapers cover to cover without any urgency, cooking a meal for Camilla with ingredients he had chosen himself from a market stall, and ending the evening playing cards without discussing any matters of state. As March progressed, their daily phone calls became a lifeline for both of them. Catherine found herself looking forward to these conversations more than any other part of her day. Charles's combination of wisdom, humor, and genuine interest in her thoughts and feelings filled a space she hadn't even realized was empty. For his part, Charles discovered that Catherine's perspective on everything from current events to family dynamics was both intelligent and refreshing. Their conversations weren't always serious. Catherine delighted Charles with stories about her children's latest adventures and observations. George's attempt to explain cricket to his school friends, Charlotte's determination to learn French by watching cartoons, Louis's conviction that all the security officers were his personal friends. These glimpses into his grandchildren's daily lives brought Charles more joy than any state dinner or official ceremony. Charles shared his own childhood memories with Catherine, stories that even William hadn't heard. His recollections of learning to fish with his grandfather, his mother's rare moments of maternal affection away from public view, his teenage years of feeling utterly unprepared for the life that awaited him. These stories helped Catherine understand not just Charles the King, but Charles the man who had been shaped by unique circumstances beyond his control. One particularly meaningful conversation occurred on a Sunday afternoon when both were feeling stronger than they had in weeks. Catherine had ventured into the garden with her children, watching them play while she sat bundled in blankets. Charles called just as she was marveling at how children seemed to find joy in the simplest things. "I was just watching George try to teach Louis how to kick a football properly," she told him. "Louis is completely hopeless at it, but George is being so patient and encouraging. It reminded me of William teaching George to ride a bike. All that gentle persistence until suddenly, the child realizes they can do it. That's the kind of King George will be someday," Charles said quietly. Patient, encouraging, finding ways to help people succeed rather than simply commanding them to do better. "You and William are raising children who will lead with kindness." The comment touched Catherine deeply because it revealed how much thought Charles gave to his grandchildren's future roles. He wasn't just their grandfather. He was helping shape the next generation of royals through his genuine interest in their character development rather than just their public training. As their friendship deepened, both Charles and Catherine began to see their current challenges differently. The forced rest that had initially felt like failure began to feel like an opportunity for reflection and growth. The vulnerability that had seemed like weakness revealed itself as a source of strength and authentic connection. Their families watched this developing relationship with growing appreciation. William saw his wife becoming more confident in her royal role through his father's mentorship, while also seeing his father's natural warmth finding expression through genuine care for Catherine. Camilla observed that Charles seemed more at peace with himself than she had ever seen him, finding purpose in supporting someone he had come to love as a true daughter. The palace staff, Those keepers of royal protocol who might have been expected to worry about such informal relationship development instead found themselves moved by witnessing authentic family bonds forming within the institution they served. Private secretaries noted that both Charles and Catherine seemed more resilient in facing their health challenges, drawing strength from their mutual support. By the end of March, what had begun as polite family check-ins had evolved into something neither of them had anticipated, a deep, genuine friendship that transcended their formal royal relationship. They had discovered that beneath their shared duty to the crown lay shared values, complementary personalities, and a mutual affection that would survive long beyond their current challenges. April arrived with an unexpected warmth that seemed to mirror the growing connection between Charles and Catherine. Both had been making steady progress in their treatments, though they remained largely out of public view, focusing on recovery under careful medical supervision. It was during this period of gradual improvement that Charles made a decision that would surprise everyone, including Catherine herself. The idea came to him during one of their daily conversations when Catherine mentioned feeling isolated despite being surrounded by family and staff. "It's strange," she had said, "being in the same house with everyone I love most, but feeling like I'm watching their lives from behind glass. Everyone is so careful around me, so protective, that sometimes I feel more like a patient than a person." Charles understood this feeling intimately. Despite Camilla's loving presence and the support of his staff, he too had been experiencing a peculiar kind of loneliness that comes with being treated as fragile when you're accustomed to being relied upon. The next morning, he called his private secretary with an unusual request. "I want to visit Catherine," he said simply. "Not a formal call, not an official royal visit. I want to have tea with my daughter-in-law." His secretary, trained to handle unusual royal requests with diplomatic efficiency, nonetheless paused. "Your Majesty, might I suggest a call to discuss the logistics? Security protocols, medical considerations." "Of course," Charles replied. "But the answer will still be yes. She needs to know she's not alone, and, frankly, so do I." The call to William came next, and Charles was touched by his son's immediate enthusiasm for the idea. "She's been having a tough week," William admitted. "The treatment is going well, but she's frustrated with how weak she still feels some days. I think seeing you would lift her spirits enormously." What followed was 24 hours of careful planning that had nothing to do with state protocol and everything to do with ensuring two recovering patients could spend time together safely and comfortably. Security was arranged discreetly, medical staff were consulted about the wisdom of the visit, and Catherine's team prepared Adelaide Cottage for an informal royal tea. Catherine's reaction to the news of Charles's planned visit was a mixture of delight and panic. She hadn't seen anyone outside her immediate family and medical team in weeks, and the thought of hosting the king, even informally, sent her into a flutter of preparation anxiety that William found both endearing and concerning. "Darling," he said gently, finding her attempting to supervise the staff in preparing the drawing room. "He's coming to see you, not to inspect the house. You could serve him tea in the garden shed, and he'd be happy just to spend time with you." Catherine paused, leaning against the doorframe as a wave of fatigue reminded her that she was still recovering. "I know you're right," she sighed. "It's just that I want everything to be perfect for him. These conversations we've been having have meant so much to me, and I want him to know how grateful I am." The day of the visit dawned bright and clear, with the kind of perfect English spring weather that makes everything seem possible. Catherine woke feeling stronger than she had in days, though she was careful not to overestimate her energy levels. She chose a comfortable dress in a soft blue that complemented her eyes, minimal makeup to avoid looking overdone, and her grandmother's pearl earrings for good luck. Charles arrived at Adelaide Cottage in an unmarked car, having insisted on a minimal security presence to keep the visit as normal as possible. As he stepped out of the vehicle, he carried a simple bouquet of flowers from his own garden at Highgrove, daffodils, and early tulips that he had cut himself that morning. The gesture was so personal, so unlike anything anyone might expect from a formal royal visit, that Catherine felt tears prick her eyes as she watched from the window. William greeted his father at the door, and, for a moment, Charles hesitated. The formal part of his brain, trained by decades of protocol, wondered if he should wait to be properly announced. But then, Catherine appeared in the hallway, moving slowly but with genuine joy lighting her face, and he forgot all about formality. "Papa," she said warmly, and Charles felt his heart lift at the sound of that word spoken in person rather than over the phone. Without thinking, he stepped forward and embraced her gently, mindful of her recovery, but unable to resist the gesture of affection. "My dear girl," he murmured, "it's so wonderful to see you looking well." The afternoon that followed was unlike any royal visit in Charles's long experience. They settled in Catherine's favorite sunny corner of the drawing room, where comfortable chairs had been arranged around a low table set with simple china. No formal service, no hovering staff, just tea and biscuits and the kind of relaxed atmosphere that had never seemed possible within royal protocol. Catherine had worried about maintaining conversation, but she needn't have. Within minutes, they had fallen into the same easy dialogue that had developed over their phone calls, enhanced now by being able to see each other's expressions and share the simple pleasure of physical presence. Charles was struck by how beautiful Catherine looked despite her recent challenges. There was a serenity about her that was different from her usual poised public demeanor, softer, more genuine, and somehow more radiant for being completely unguarded. She moved a bit more slowly than usual and tired more easily, but her eyes were bright with interest and affection. For her part, Catherine was amazed by how naturally Charles fit into the informal setting of her family home. The man she had always known as a somewhat formal figure, careful with his words and conscious of his position, relaxed completely in her drawing room. He admired the family photos scattered on side tables, asked genuine questions about the children's latest interests, and seemed utterly content to be nowhere else but sharing tea with her on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. They talked about books they had been reading during their recovery time. Charles had been working his way through biographies of previous monarchs, trying to understand how others had balanced personal challenges with public duty. Catherine had discovered a love for historical fiction, losing herself in stories of ordinary people living through extraordinary times. "I've been thinking," Catherine said as she poured fresh tea, "about something you said on the phone last week, about how illness forces us to be honest about who we really are underneath all our roles. I think I'm starting to understand what you meant." Charles leaned forward, interested. "Tell me." "Well," Catherine continued thoughtfully, "for years I've been so focused on being the right kind of Princess of Wales, saying the right things, wearing the right clothes, representing the monarchy properly. But these past months, when I've had to step back from all of that, I've remembered what I actually care about. Not the protocol or the public image, but the real work, connecting with people, making them feel seen and valued, using this platform to actually help rather than just represent." Charles nodded slowly. "That's exactly right. I've had 73 years to learn that lesson, and I'm not sure I understood it as clearly as you just expressed it. The crown is important, the institution matters, but only because of what we can do for people, not because of what people can do for us." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of children arriving home from school. Catherine's face lit up as voices echoed through the hallway, and Charles found himself smiling at her obvious joy in hearing her children's return. "Would you like to see them?" Catherine asked. "They've been asking about you constantly since they knew you were coming." What followed was perhaps the most natural interaction Charles had ever had with his grandchildren. Free from the formal constraints of official occasions, George, Charlotte, and Louis simply saw their grandfather who had come to visit their mother. They showed him their school projects, told him about their friends, and Charlotte insisted on demonstrating her improved French pronunciation. Charles was charmed by their ease and openness, and Catherine watched with deep satisfaction as he engaged with each child at their level, discussing football strategy with George, admiring Charlotte's artwork with genuine interest, and listening patiently to Louis's somewhat garbled account of his day at nursery school. "Grandpapa," Louis announced solemnly, "Mama said you've been poorly like she has. Are you feeling better now?" Charles knelt down to Louis's level, touched by the child's straightforward concern. "I am feeling much better, thank you for asking. And seeing you and your siblings and your mama today has made me feel better still." After the children went to play in the garden, Charles and Catherine returned to their conversation, but something had shifted. The visit was no longer just about two adults supporting each other through difficult times. It had become a family moment that felt completely natural and right. As the afternoon wore on, Catherine found herself sharing things she had never told anyone outside her immediate family. Her early fears about marrying into the royal family, her occasional moments of doubt about her ability to fulfill her role, her deep love for the work she did despite the pressures that came with it. Charles, in turn, spoke with unprecedented openness about his own journey. The loneliness of his early years as heir, the weight of expectations that had shaped every decision he made, his deep love for his sons despite the challenges of raising children under such unique circumstances. "You know," Charles said as the late afternoon light began to fade, "I've been thinking about legacy a great deal these past months. What we leave behind, how we're remembered. But, sitting here with you today, I realize that the most important legacy might be this: the connections we make, the love we share, the way we support each other through difficult times." Catherine felt a lump form in her throat. "These conversations we've had, this friendship we've built, it's meant more to me than any official recognition or public achievement. You've helped me understand not just how to be royal, but how to be human while being royal." As the visit drew to a close, neither wanted the afternoon to end. There had been something healing about spending time together in person, seeing each other as fully dimensional people rather than just voices on the phone. The embrace they shared as Charles prepared to leave was longer and warmer than royal protocol would typically permit, but it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "Thank you," Catherine whispered, "for reminding me that I'm not alone in this." "Thank you," Charles replied, "for reminding me that being vulnerable isn't weakness, it's the beginning of real strength." As Charles's car disappeared down the drive, Catherine stood in the doorway feeling more energized than she had in months. William, who had observed the entire visit with growing amazement, put his arm around his wife's shoulders. "That was beautiful," he said simply. "I've never seen either of you so relaxed and genuine together." Catherine leaned into her husband's embrace, watching the last light fade from the spring sky. "I think," she said slowly, "we just became a real family." The visit had accomplished something neither of them had anticipated. It had taken their telephone friendship and transformed it into something deeper and more lasting, a genuine bond that would survive not just their current health challenges, but would become a foundation for their relationship for years to come. In the days that followed, both Charles and Catherine noticed a change in their outlook. The personal connection they had made gave them new strength for the challenges ahead, and new confidence that they truly understood and supported each other in ways that went far beyond their formal royal relationship. The afternoon at Adelaide Cottage had proven that sometimes the most important royal visits are the ones that happen when no one is watching, when protocol is set aside in favor of genuine human connection, and when a king and his daughter-in-law discover that they are, above all else, family. Following Charles's visit to Adelaide Cottage, something fundamental had shifted in both their recoveries. The personal connection they had forged seemed to accelerate their healing in ways that purely medical treatment couldn't achieve. It was as if having someone who truly understood their unique challenges had lifted a weight neither had fully realized they were carrying. Catherine found herself with renewed energy for the small daily tasks that had seemed overwhelming just weeks before. She began joining William for short walks in the gardens again, started reading bedtime stories to the children without feeling exhausted afterward, and even felt strong enough to video call her parents in Mustique, where they were taking a well-deserved holiday. "You look like yourself again," her mother, Carol, observed during one of their calls. "Not just physically, though that's wonderful to see, but there's something in your eyes that's been missing these past months. You seem peaceful." Catherine knew exactly what her mother meant. The anxiety that had accompanied her diagnosis and early treatment, not just about her health, but about letting people down, failing in her duties, being seen as weak, had been replaced by a quiet confidence in her ability to handle whatever came next. Charles experienced a similar transformation. His treatment sessions, once endured with stoic determination, became opportunities for reflection and planning rather than ordeals to be survived. He began dictating notes for a memoir he had never had time to consider writing, capturing not just the historical events he had witnessed, but his personal evolution through decades of preparation for kingship. "You seem different," Camilla told him one morning as they shared breakfast in the sunny morning room at Clarence House. "Lighter somehow. More like the man I fell in love with, before all the royal responsibilities weighed you down." Charles considered this carefully. "I think," he said slowly, "I've remembered that being king doesn't mean being alone. Catherine has helped me understand that seeking support isn't weakness, it's wisdom, and that sharing our struggles actually makes us stronger leaders, not weaker ones." The ripple effects of their deepened relationship extended far beyond their personal recovery. William watched his wife regain not just her physical strength, but her confidence in her royal role, bolstered by his father's mentorship and genuine affection. The complex feelings he had harbored about his father, love mixed with frustration, respect tempered by old grievances, began to evolve into something cleaner, more mature. She's helped him become the father I always needed him to be, William confided to Catherine one evening. They were in their bedroom, Catherine propped up against pillows as she did her evening reading, William getting ready for bed after a day of covering some of his wife's postponed engagements. And he's helped me become the royal I always hoped I could be, Catherine replied. Not by teaching me protocol or public speaking techniques, but by showing me that authenticity and duty aren't opposites. They're actually the same thing when you do them right. This newfound understanding began to influence how both Charles and Catherine approached their gradual return to public duties. Instead of simply resuming their previous schedules, they started incorporating lessons learned during their recovery into how they engaged with their roles. Charles's first official engagement after his treatment break was telling in its simplicity. Rather than a formal state function, he chose to visit a cancer support center in London. The visit was personal in a way his previous engagements rarely were. He spoke not as a monarch dispensing royal attention, but as someone who had walked the same path as the people he was meeting. The thing about facing something like this, he told a group of patients and their families, is that it strips away everything that doesn't really matter and shows you what does. Family, friendship, the kindness of strangers, the dedication of medical professionals. These become your whole world, and you realize they were always what mattered most. The response was extraordinary. People who might typically be nervous meeting the king found themselves in genuine conversation with a man who understood their fears and frustrations from personal experience. The formal barriers that usually exist between royalty and the public seemed to dissolve in the face of shared human experience. Catherine's approach to her return was equally thoughtful. Her first public engagement was a private meeting with parents at a children's hospital, discussing the challenges of maintaining family stability when a parent is seriously ill. She spoke openly about the difficulty of explaining her treatment to her children, the guilt she felt about disrupting their routines, and the strategies she and William had developed for maintaining normalcy. One of the hardest things, she shared with a group of mothers facing similar challenges, was accepting that it's okay for your children to see you need care sometimes. We want to protect them from worry, but there's also value in letting them learn that families support each other through difficult times. Her words resonated deeply with parents who were struggling with the same balance between protection and honesty. The conversation that followed was more like a support group discussion than a traditional royal engagement, with Catherine both offering and receiving insights about parenting through crisis. The media coverage of both engagements was notably different from typical royal reporting. Instead of focusing on fashion choices or formal protocol, journalists found themselves writing about authentic human moments and genuine connections. The public response was overwhelmingly positive, with many commenting that they felt they were seeing the real people behind the royal titles for the first time. This new approach to public service created a template that both Charles and Catherine would continue to follow. They began choosing engagements not just based on duty or tradition, but on opportunities for meaningful connection with people facing real challenges. Their shared experience of vulnerability had taught them that the most powerful thing they could offer others wasn't royal attention, but human understanding. Their collaboration began extending beyond individual engagements to joint initiatives that drew on both their perspectives. They launched a quiet but significant project supporting families affected by serious illness, combining Charles's connections in the medical community with Catherine's insight into family dynamics and child psychology. The project, initially kept deliberately low profile, focused on practical support rather than public attention. They funded respite care for families struggling with medical expenses, supported training for teachers dealing with children whose parents were seriously ill, and created resources for helping families maintain stability during health crises. What we're really doing, Catherine explained to William, is creating the support system we wished we'd had. Not that we weren't incredibly blessed with help, but there were emotional challenges that no amount of practical support could address. We needed people who understood from experience, not just training. Charles echoed this sentiment in his own reflections. For all our privilege and access to the best medical care, Catherine and I still faced the fundamental human challenge of processing fear, uncertainty, and the humbling experience of physical limitation. That experience is universal, regardless of circumstances. As spring turned to summer, their collaborative relationship deepened in unexpected ways. They began meeting regularly, not for formal briefings or protocol discussions, but for what they privately called perspective sessions. These informal meetings, usually over tea at Clarence's house or in Catherine's favorite spot in the Adelaide cottage garden, became opportunities to discuss everything from family challenges to constitutional questions. These conversations revealed intellectual compatibility that surprised both of them. Catherine's analytical mind, shaped by her art history background and natural curiosity, complemented Charles's decades of experience and philosophical bent. They found themselves able to discuss complex issues about the monarchy's future role with a frankness that would have been impossible within formal palace structures. "You know," Charles said during one of these sessions, "I've spent so many years being careful about what I say, always aware that my opinions carry weight because of my position. But, talking with you, I remember what it's like to simply think out loud with someone I trust." Catherine understood this completely. "I felt that same constraint. Every opinion scrutinized, every casual comment analyzed for deeper meaning. But, with you, I can say what I actually think without wondering how it will be interpreted or whether it's the right royal perspective." Their families watched this intellectual partnership develop with fascination and approval. William began including both his father and wife in discussions about his own future role as heir apparent, recognizing that their combined perspectives offered insights he couldn't achieve alone. The conversations that emerged were more substantive and forward-thinking than any formal constitutional training could provide. Camilla observed the friendship with particular satisfaction. She had long hoped that Charles would find someone within the family who could engage with his more thoughtful, philosophical side. Catherine's combination of intelligence, empathy, and genuine affection for Charles created exactly the kind of relationship Camilla had wished for her husband. The children, too, benefited from their grandfather's increased presence and emotional availability. Charles began spending more time at Adelaide Cottage, not for formal visits, but simply as family time. He would help with homework, listen to the children's stories about school and friends, and share his own childhood memories in ways that made history come alive for them. George, in particular, seemed to blossom under his grandfather's attention. The boy who would someday be king began asking thoughtful questions about leadership, responsibility, and how to help people who were struggling. Charles answered with a patience and depth that surprised even William, drawing on both his decades of experience and his recent lessons about vulnerability and authentic connection. By midsummer, both Charles and Catherine had not just recovered from their health challenges but emerged stronger and more purposeful than before. Their friendship had become a source of mutual strength that enhanced rather than complicated their individual relationships with other family members. The transformation was visible to anyone who observed them together. The formal politeness that had characterized their previous interactions had been replaced by genuine warmth, intellectual compatibility, and mutual respect that ran much deeper than their shared royal roles. More importantly, they had discovered that their individual strengths, Charles's experience and constitutional knowledge, Catherine's emotional intelligence, and modern perspective, created a powerful partnership for addressing the challenges facing the monarchy in the 21st century. Their recovery had become not just a return to previous levels of health and function, but an evolution into more authentic, connected, and effective versions of themselves. The vulnerability they had shared had transformed into a source of strength that would influence their approach to royal service for years to come. By autumn 2024, the transformation was complete, though neither Charles nor Catherine would have described it in such dramatic terms. To them, it felt like the most natural evolution in the world. Two people who had discovered genuine affection and mutual respect through shared challenge, now building a future that honored both their individual roles and their deepened relationship. The first public indication of how significantly their bond had evolved came during Charles's official birthday celebration in June. Traditional protocol called for a formal family lineup on the Buckingham Palace balcony, with carefully orchestrated positions reflecting the hierarchy of succession. But when Catherine appeared beside Charles, the interaction between them was notably warm and unguarded. Observers noticed Charles's genuine smile when Catherine whispered something that made him laugh, the way he instinctively steadied her elbow when a gust of wind threatened her balance, and how naturally she leaned slightly toward him during the national anthem. These small gestures spoke of a comfort level that formal relationships rarely achieve. "They look like family," one longtime royal correspondent noted. "Not just people fulfilling roles together, but genuinely fond relatives who enjoy each other's company." The comment captured something essential that had developed between them. Their relationship had transcended the boundaries of in-law politeness or even dutiful family connection. They had become chosen family in the truest sense, people who genuinely liked and respected each other beyond any obligation or expectation. This evolution became particularly evident in how they began working together on royal initiatives. The traditional model of royal patronages involved individual family members taking responsibility for separate organizations and causes. But Charles and Catherine began developing joint approaches that drew on both their experiences and perspectives. Their most significant collaboration emerged from their shared interest in supporting families through crisis. What began as their informal project helping families affected by illness evolved into a comprehensive initiative addressing the broader challenges of maintaining family stability during difficult times. Catherine brought her deep understanding of child development and family dynamics, while Charles contributed his decades of experience working with charitable organizations and his connections throughout the British establishment. Together, they created something neither could have achieved alone, a support network that addressed both practical needs and emotional challenges. What we learned during our own difficult period, Catherine explained to a gathering of social workers and family support professionals, was that healing happens not just through medical treatment, but through connection, understanding, and knowing you're not alone. We want to help other families access that same kind of support. The initiative, officially launched in September, represented a new model for royal charitable work. Instead of simply lending their names to existing organizations, Charles and Catherine had developed a comprehensive approach that addressed gaps in current support systems. They worked directly with experts to design programs, personally met with families to understand their needs, and used their platform not just for publicity, but for substantive advocacy. Their collaboration extended into constitutional areas as well. Charles began including Catherine in discussions about the monarchy's evolving role, recognizing that her perspective as a newer member of the family offered insights he couldn't achieve on his own. These conversations, often joined by William, became informal planning sessions for the future direction of the institution. Catherine sees things I've become too close to notice, Charles admitted to Camilla one evening. She asks questions that force me to examine assumptions I've carried for decades. And she does it with such genuine curiosity and respect that even challenging conversations feel supportive rather than confrontational. This intellectual partnership proved invaluable as the royal family navigated various challenges throughout the year. Catherine's ability to understand public sentiment, combined with Charles's constitutional knowledge, created a powerful tool for decision-making that strengthened the monarchy's connection with contemporary Britain. Their personal relationship continued deepening as well. The daily phone calls that had sustained them during their recovery evolved into regular family dinners, shared holidays, and the kind of casual interaction that extended family members enjoy when they genuinely care about each other. Charles became a regular presence at Adelaide Cottage, not for formal visits, but simply as grandpapa, who enjoyed spending time with his grandchildren and daughter-in-law. These visits often included Camilla, creating a four-generational family dynamic that brought joy to everyone involved. Catherine, for her part, began feeling comfortable enough with Charles to seek his advice on everything from difficult royal decisions to parenting challenges. Their relationship had evolved to the point where she could call him for support during stressful days or share good news when she needed someone to celebrate with her. He's become the father figure I never expected to find in royal life, Catherine confided to her sister Pippa during one of their regular walks in Kensington Gardens. Not replacing my own father, but adding a different kind of support and wisdom. He understands the pressures I face in ways that even William sometimes can't. This fatherly aspect of Charles's relationship with Catherine became particularly evident during challenging moments. When Catherine faced criticism over a scheduling conflict that disappointed some charity organizations, Charles was the first to call with support and practical advice. "My dear," he said gently, "one of the hardest lessons about royal life is that you cannot please everyone, no matter how good your intentions. The measure of success isn't perfect public approval, but whether you can look at yourself in the mirror each morning knowing you've acted with integrity and genuine care for others." His words, backed by decades of experience with royal criticism and public pressure, gave Catherine perspective she couldn't have gained any other way. More importantly, they reinforced her confidence in her own judgment and approach to royal duties. The children continued to benefit enormously from their grandfather's increased involvement in their lives. Charles's relationship with George, in particular, developed new dimensions as the boy grew older and began understanding more about his future responsibilities. Rather than burdening his grandson with formal training about kingship, Charles focused on helping George develop the character traits that would serve him well regardless of his role. They gardened together, discussed history through stories rather than lessons, and talked about the importance of kindness and curiosity in leadership. "Grandpapa doesn't make being royal seem scary," George told his parents one evening. "He makes it seem like helping people, which is what I want to do anyway." Charlotte and Louis also flourished under Charles's attention, but in their own ways. Charlotte appreciated her grandfather's artistic interests and love of beautiful things, while Louis simply enjoyed having another adult who was endlessly patient with his questions and adventures. These relationships with his grandchildren brought Charles tremendous joy, but also deepened his connection with Catherine as they shared the experience of watching the children grow and develop. Their conversations about the children's education, interests, and personalities became another layer of their relationship, based on mutual devotion to the young people they were helping to shape. As the year drew to a close, the transformation in both Charles and Catherine was evident to everyone around them. They had each found new confidence and purpose in their royal roles, but more than that, they had discovered the strength that comes from genuine family support. Their health challenges, which had initially seemed like potential disasters, had instead become the foundation for a relationship that enhanced every other aspect of their lives. The vulnerability they had shared had created trust, the understanding they had developed had fostered genuine affection, and their mutual support had made them both more effective in their individual roles. "I used to worry about living up to the royal women who came before me," Catherine reflected during one of their regular tea conversations as 2024 ended. "Diana's compassion, your mother's dedication, the Queen Mother's strength. But you've helped me understand that I don't need to be like them. I need to be the best version of myself." Charles smiled at his daughter-in-law, feeling profound satisfaction in the relationship they had built. "And you, my dear Catherine, have helped me understand that being a good king isn't about maintaining distance or projecting invincibility. It's about connecting authentically with people while honoring the responsibility of the crown." Their journey from polite in-laws to genuine family had created something neither had anticipated when they first faced their health challenges. They had discovered that the most powerful royal partnerships aren't built on protocol or duty alone, but on mutual respect, shared values, and the kind of love that grows from truly knowing and supporting each other. As they looked toward the future, both Charles and Catherine carried with them the lessons learned during their most vulnerable months. That strength comes from connection, that authentic leadership requires personal honesty, and that the best legacy they could leave would be the relationships they had built and the example they had set of facing life's challenges with grace, courage, and love. Their story had become more than a tale of royal recovery. It was a testament to the transformative power of genuine human connection, the strength found in vulnerability shared with trusted companions, and the possibility of building family bonds that transcend formal roles and expectations. The warmth between them would continue to be evident in every public appearance, every joint initiative, and every family gathering for years to come. They had not just survived a difficult period together. They had used it to create something beautiful and lasting that would strengthen both their individual lives and the institution they served. In the end, their shared journey through illness had given them something precious: the knowledge that they were not alone in carrying the unique burdens of royal life, and the deep satisfaction of having earned each other's trust, respect, and genuine affection through the simple but powerful act of caring for one another when care was most needed.